In today's world, we often hear about men silently giving up on love. It's not something discussed openly, yet it seems to be an unspoken truth. Men are expected to be strong, independent, and emotionally self-sufficient, and love withal. Its vulnerability and uncertainty can seem like a risk too great to take. But why is that? Why do so many modern men avoid the depths of emotional connection? Kierkegaard, one of the most profound thinkers of the 19th century, provides a lens through which we can explore this question. Kierkegaard's philosophy challenges conventional ideas about love, vulnerability, and masculinity. To him, love is not just a feeling, it's a profound existential risk. Love requires the courage to open oneself fully to another person, to expose one's true self, and to risk the possibility of pain, rejection, or loss. In today's world, where emotional detachment is often praised, the idea of loving deeply and vulnerably seems like a weakness. This is particularly true for men who may feel pressured to keep their emotions in check, fearing that opening up might somehow undermine their strength. But what Kierkegaard understood, and what we may be missing today, is that love is the ultimate act of strength. It's easy to think that avoiding love, or at least avoiding emotional vulnerability, is a form of self-preservation. Yet, in doing so, men might be denying themselves the one thing that could truly fulfill them: deep, meaningful connection. The constant pursuit of self-sufficiency can lead to a form of isolation, where love becomes something to fear rather than embrace. The reality is that many men are silently yearning for connection, but societal expectations prevent them from pursuing it. They retreat into the safety of emotional walls, unsure of how to let their guard down without appearing weak. Kierkegaard believed that love, in all its messy, risky beauty, is not something to shy away from. Instead, it is a journey that leads to self-discovery, growth, and ultimately freedom. The question remains, what would happen if more men chose love, vulnerability, and authenticity over silence and emotional armor? Kierkegaard believed that love, in its purest form, is a profound existential risk, and to truly love is to expose oneself to the possibility of deep pain and vulnerability. For many men today, that risk feels too great. It is easier to avoid the emotional intensity of love than to confront the possibility of heartbreak, rejection, or the discomfort of showing weakness. Love requires an openness that many feel unprepared to offer. This emotional withdrawal, however, is often misinterpreted as strength or self-sufficiency, but in Kierkegaard's view, it is nothing more than a defense mechanism that shields one from the deeper truth of existence. Men are often socialized to suppress their emotions, to toughen up, and to avoid appearing vulnerable. From a young age, many are taught that emotions like sadness, fear, or longing are signs of weakness, traits to be avoided. As a result, men may grow up learning to mask their emotions, to hide behind stoicism or detachment, and to see love as a threat to their emotional stability. But in doing so, they miss out on the very thing that could bring them the most fulfillment. Kierkegaard's view of love is radically different. For him, love is not a weakness, it is the ultimate demonstration of human courage. It requires the ability to place one's heart in the hands of another, to be willing to be seen fully, flaws and all. In this sense, love is a leap of faith, a choice to embrace the unknown, to risk pain for the possibility of deeper connection and growth. Modern men may struggle to understand this paradox. The societal ideal of masculinity often places the highest value on independence, control, and emotional distance. These ideals create a narrative where to be a man means to be emotionally self-reliant, never needing to rely on others for love or support. Yet in reality, this emotional distance creates a silent burden, a weight that becomes heavier with time. This is where Kierkegaard's concept of existential anxiety comes into play. Anxiety for him is not simply a feeling of fear or nervousness, but the realization that one must make choices that shape their very existence. Love in this sense is a choice to risk vulnerability and to confront the fear of being hurt, rejected, or exposed. It is a choice to embrace one's own humanity, to accept the possibility of failure and heartbreak as an inherent part of the journey. However, the reluctance to love often stems from a lack of self-knowledge. Many men fear love because they do not fully understand themselves. They have spent so much time suppressing their emotions and desires that they have lost touch with their own inner world. Without self-awareness, love becomes a daunting and unfamiliar territory, something to be avoided at all costs. Kierkegaard argued that true love can only emerge from a place of self-knowledge. Only when one has confronted their own fears, insecurities, and limitations can they truly open their heart to another person. Until then, the fear of rejection, of appearing weak or needy, holds them back. Yet the consequences of avoiding love are profound. Existential isolation is one of the key themes in Kierkegaard's work. By withdrawing from love, men choose to remain emotionally disconnected, trapped in a cycle of loneliness and unfulfilled longing. The world becomes a place where relationships are transactional and superficial, leaving no room for deep, transformative connection. This detachment may appear as self-sufficiency, but it is a hollow existence, one that lacks meaning, depth, and authenticity. It is a life where one's potential for emotional richness is locked away, never to be realized. In Kierkegaard's view, the fear of love is the fear of confronting oneself. Love is a mirror that reflects not only the beauty of connection, but also the vulnerabilities and flaws that one might otherwise avoid. To love deeply is to engage with life fully, to accept the complexities of one's own heart, and to surrender the illusion of perfect control. It requires a radical willingness to let go of the need to protect oneself from emotional pain and to trust that love, despite its inherent risks, can lead to growth, understanding, and self-realization. Men who withdraw from love are often not aware of the deeper implications of their choices. The very act of avoidance, of closing off their hearts, is a denial of their own humanity. To love, according to Kierkegaard, is not only a choice for connection with others, but also a choice for self-realization and self-acceptance. It is a path that leads to personal growth, one that demands the courage to face one's own fears, flaws, and imperfections. The question is not whether love will hurt, it will. The question is whether we will choose to embrace love despite the pain, to take the leap of faith into vulnerability, and to allow it to transform us into more whole and authentic beings. For many modern men, the fear of love stems from the same place, a fear of the unknown. But as Kierkegaard suggests, the true beauty of love lies not in avoiding it, but in surrendering to it with all its uncertainties. In embracing love, we step into the fullness of our humanity, and in doing so, we find the courage to live more deeply and authentically. In today's world, masculinity is often defined by strength, independence, and emotional control. Modern men are expected to be self-sufficient, emotionally detached, and impervious to the vulnerabilities that love and connection can bring. These expectations are deeply ingrained in societal norms, making it difficult for many men to acknowledge the emotional depth of love or to embrace vulnerability. However, Kierkegaard's philosophy challenges these ideals by asserting that true strength is not found in emotional repression, but in the courage to love authentically and embrace one's emotional needs. For Kierkegaard, the essence of love lies in its ability to transcend societal expectations and the ego's need for validation. He saw love as the highest form of human existence, one that requires an individual to confront their own fears, insecurities, and limitations. Yet in modern society, many men have been conditioned to view love through the lens of societal masculinity, which values emotional restraint and independence over intimacy and connection. This creates a paradox. Men are told that emotional strength means detachment, while Kierkegaard believed that true emotional strength is found in emotional engagement. For him, love is not about control, it's about surrendering to the possibility of pain and vulnerability. The modern masculine ideal often promotes a sense of emotional stoicism, encouraging men to mask their feelings and avoid showing weakness. This stoicism, however, leads to a disconnect from one's authentic self. In Kierkegaard's view, this detachment is a form of self-alienation, where men suppress their emotional needs and desires to fit into a prescribed role of masculinity. As a result, they may experience feelings of emptiness and loneliness. Despite having everything the world deems as successful, career achievements, financial stability, and social status, many men still find themselves emotionally isolated. This is a direct consequence of prioritizing emotional control over emotional expression. In Kierkegaard's work, he speaks of resentment, a state where people define themselves in opposition to others rather than through their own values. Modern men, in many ways, experience a form of resentment when they feel the need to assert their dominance over others to validate their existence. This desire for control often leads to emotional disconnection because men become caught up in external validation and societal expectations instead of focusing on their true emotional selves. Kierkegaard's philosophy offers a profound critique of living a life devoid of love, highlighting the deep existential emptiness that arises when we avoid the vulnerability love requires. For Kierkegaard, love is not a mere emotional indulgence or a fleeting desire, but a fundamental existential engagement. To live without love is to live in self-alienation, trapped in a world of surface-level existence, disconnected from our deepest needs and desires. Modern men, in particular, often find themselves in this position. They may achieve external success, accumulate wealth and gain social recognition, but without love, they find themselves living a life that feels hollow, incomplete, and ultimately absurd. When men withdraw from love, they simultaneously withdraw from the core of what it means to be human. Kierkegaard referred to this as an existential void, a place where one feels detached from the world and alienated from their true self. The irony here is that, in an attempt to protect themselves from the vulnerability that love demands, many men end up creating a far greater vulnerability, the vulnerability of emotional isolation. They cut themselves off from the very thing that could bring them the deepest sense of fulfillment and connection. The paradox is clear. By avoiding love out of fear, they end up creating a life that is far emptier and more disconnected than the one they feared. This sense of alienation is further compounded by the lack of self-awareness that accompanies the avoidance of love. Kierkegaard believed that many people are not fully aware of their motives, desires, or the deeper forces that shape their lives. Without this self-awareness, we become slaves to external forces, society's expectations, the opinions of others, and the pressure to conform to prescribed roles. For modern men, this means being constantly caught between the desire for connection and the need to appear strong and independent. The tension between these forces creates a life that is both meaningless and unfulfilled. They may be outwardly successful, but inwardly they are lost. Kierkegaard's critique of this emotional disconnection is powerful. He argues that the pursuit of external success at the cost of emotional fulfillment is a tragic mistake. This mindset ultimately leads to a life that is defined by surface-level interactions, where true intimacy and connection are sacrificed for the sake of appearing strong, self-sufficient, and in control. This denial of love and vulnerability doesn't shield men from pain. Rather, it locks them in a cycle of disconnection and loneliness. By avoiding love, they inadvertently expose themselves to a deeper, more profound kind of emptiness, one that is felt in the quiet moments when they realize that despite everything they have achieved, they are still emotionally alone. Kierkegaard understood that love is the only way to transcend this existential void. For him, love was not just about emotional connection with others, but about self-overcoming, the process of confronting one's deepest fears and limitations, and growing beyond them. Love is the force that challenges us to step outside of our comfort zones and face the unknown. It requires a leap of faith, a willingness to embrace the uncertainty and vulnerability that comes with opening our hearts to another person. In this sense, love is not a weakness, but the ultimate strength. It is the courage to expose oneself, to risk pain and heartache for the sake of connection and authenticity. However, modern men often see love as a threat to their carefully constructed emotional defenses. Love requires the courage to let go, to stop controlling every aspect of one's life, and to surrender to the vulnerability that comes with truly connecting with another person. The fear of rejection, failure, or emotional pain keeps many men locked in a state of avoidance. They are afraid that by giving themselves to love, they will lose control, or worse, expose themselves to emotional harm. But Kierkegaard challenges this perception. For him, the greatest threat is not the possibility of pain, but the existential despair that comes from living a life without love. Love is the antidote to this despair. It is the path to self-realization and authentic existence. The alternative to love is not just emotional detachment, but a kind of existential resignation. Men who avoid love out of fear often resign themselves to a life of emotional numbness, a life defined by superficial relationships, empty accomplishments, and unfulfilled desires. Kierkegaard's philosophy offers a clear warning. Living without love leads to a life that is devoid of meaning and depth. It is only through embracing love, with all its uncertainties and vulnerabilities, that men can truly come alive. Kierkegaard's call to embrace love is not a naive plea for romantic bliss, but a profound invitation to live authentically. To love deeply is to confront the fragility of existence and to rise above the fear that keeps us emotionally disconnected. It is the courage to step into the unknown and allow love to shape us into something greater than we were before. By choosing love, men transcend the absurdity of living without it and move closer to the authentic self, a self that is connected to others, grounded in vulnerability, and free from the chains of fear. Love, for Kierkegaard, is not just a feeling, it is the very essence of what it means to be fully human. Kierkegaard's philosophy invites us to take a courageous step, one that requires a profound shift in how we view love. At the heart of his teachings lies the concept of the leap of faith, the willingness to move forward without certainty, to embrace the unknown, and to trust in the possibility of something greater than ourselves. For modern men, this leap of faith is especially daunting because it involves the risk of vulnerability, an element of love that many have been taught to avoid. In a world that values control and emotional independence, taking that leap feels like stepping into a void. Yet, Kierkegaard believed that love is only possible through this very leap. Without it, we remain trapped in emotional isolation, disconnected from the richness of life and the depth of human connection. The fear of love is not a new concept, but it is one that modern society has amplified. Men are often conditioned to believe that to be vulnerable is to be weak, that to love fully is to lose control, and that to open one's heart is to risk being hurt. These fears, though understandable, are ultimately self-imposed barriers that keep men from experiencing the transformative power of love. Kierkegaard argued that love is not about control, it is about surrender. To love is to let go of the need to be perfect, to trust that despite the risks, the rewards of connection, understanding, and growth far outweigh the fear of pain. It is through this surrender that we truly discover the meaning of love. For Kierkegaard, the leap of faith is a radical act of courage. It's a choice to live fully, even in the face of uncertainty. Taking the leap of faith in love means choosing vulnerability over emotional self-protection, connection over isolation, and authenticity over emotional armor. It requires us to let go of the illusion of certainty and control, and to trust that love, even with its inherent risks, is worth the vulnerability. Many modern men fear the pain of love, rejection, betrayal, or emotional turmoil, but Kierkegaard believed that this fear is rooted in a misunderstanding of love's true nature. Love is not something to be avoided. It is a force that compels us to grow, to evolve, and to transcend our limitations. Without love, we are left with a hollow existence, one that may appear successful on the outside, but is ultimately empty at its core. Kierkegaard warned that without love, we live in a state of existential despair, disconnected from our true selves and from others. To take the leap of faith is to recognize that love is not about winning or avoiding pain, but about embracing the process of becoming. It is through the act of loving, despite the uncertainty and fear, that we move towards self-actualization and personal growth. Love forces us to confront our own insecurities, to examine our fears, and to engage in the difficult work of self-improvement. It is not an easy path, but it is the only one that leads to true emotional freedom and fulfillment. Modern men often shy away from this challenge, preferring the comfort of emotional distance and detachment. But Kierkegaard believed that this detachment is the greatest tragedy. A life without love is a life devoid of meaning, purpose, and true connection. The leap of faith in love also requires a shift in how we view relationships. For many men, relationships are often seen through a transactional lens. What can I get out of this? What can she offer me? But Kierkegaard's view of love challenges this perspective. True love, in his philosophy, is not about gaining something from another person. It is about giving oneself completely, without expectation of return. This kind of love is unconditional, rooted in the desire to share one's life and heart with another, not because it will bring rewards or validation, but because it is the truest expression of the self. Kierkegaard believed that love is not about seeking perfection in others, but accepting the imperfections of both oneself and the one you love. In embracing another person's flaws, you embrace your own. For men who fear the leap of faith, Kierkegaard offers a path toward transformation. The leap of faith is not a one-time act. It is a continuous process of choosing love, of embracing vulnerability, and of trusting in the unknown. It is through this process that we move from emotional isolation to genuine connection. The courage to love, to let go of the need for control, and to embrace the uncertainty of relationships is not a sign of weakness. In Kierkegaard's philosophy, true strength in love is not about dominating another person or controlling the narrative of a relationship, but rather about maintaining a deep, inner groundedness while allowing love to evolve naturally. For Kierkegaard, the courage to love is not simply the act of choosing to be open and vulnerable. It is about the continuous process of self-mastery and self-awareness. Love requires men to confront their deepest insecurities, to face the parts of themselves They often hide, and to learn to remain emotionally centered, even when relationships become challenging. This is where the true strength of love lies, not in the absence of vulnerability, but in the ability to stay authentic to one's values and beliefs, even when the external pressures of love may feel overwhelming. Modern men often face immense pressure to conform to the idea of stoic masculinity, where emotional openness is seen as a weakness. Many view vulnerability as something that exposes them to humiliation or rejection. As a result, emotional self-sufficiency becomes a shield, something that hides the true needs for connection and intimacy beneath a surface of emotional armor. However, Kierkegaard's teachings reveal that emotional self-sufficiency is an illusion. True strength is not found in the rejection of emotional engagement, but in the ability to be vulnerable and still stand firm in one's authentic self. To be able to face the emotional challenges that love presents and rise above them without compromising one's identity is the ultimate expression of emotional strength. One of the core aspects of love, according to Kierkegaard, is the recognition of self-limitation. This means understanding that we are all flawed, and that love is not about seeking perfection in another person, but about learning to accept and love each other's imperfections. Many men struggle with this aspect of love because it requires humility, the ability to admit that we are not perfect and that we need others. The societal pressure to be the strong one can make it difficult to acknowledge the deep emotional needs that we all have. But Kierkegaard teaches that it is precisely in embracing our weaknesses and limitations that we find the power to love deeply. To love fully is to surrender the need for perfection, both in ourselves and in others, and instead focus on the growth that can emerge from embracing the imperfections that make us human. Modern men often see love as a transactional affair. 1. Where emotional investment is measured by outcomes, whether that is validation, praise, or reciprocation. This view of love, however, is fundamentally flawed. Kierkegaard argued that love is not about receiving something in return, but about giving without expectation. True love requires selflessness, the willingness to engage with another person without trying to manipulate the relationship for personal gain. This selfless engagement is what frees us from the cycles of insecurity and dependence on external validation. It is the capacity to love, regardless of the outcome, that makes love such a powerful force in personal transformation. To truly love, then, is to engage in a form of self-overcoming. It is about moving beyond the ego's need to protect itself and constantly seek approval and recognition. This self-overcoming is not passive or submissive. Rather, it is a courageous act of emotional growth and transformation. By choosing to love, especially when it feels difficult or vulnerable, we are choosing to transcend the limitations of the self and open ourselves up to something greater. Kierkegaard's leap of faith is not just a one-time action, but an ongoing process that requires constant reflection, growth, and the willingness to challenge our own beliefs and fears. Love calls us to step beyond the boundaries of our comfort zone and to embrace new ways of thinking, being, and feeling. For men today, the journey toward this emotional freedom is fraught with obstacles. Society tells them that to be a man means to avoid emotional depth, to resist expressing feelings, and to focus on achievement and success. This detachment often leads to emotional repression, which can manifest in feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and frustration. But Kierkegaard's wisdom offers a path out of this isolation, one that encourages men to embrace the fullness of their emotional experience. By allowing themselves to experience love without holding back, they can break free from the constraints of emotional repression and live more authentically. The real power of love, then, is not in winning or proving anything to anyone else. It is not about mastering others or securing a certain outcome. The true power of love lies in the freedom it offers, the freedom to be vulnerable, to give without expecting, and to grow into a more authentic version of oneself. When men learn to embrace love in this way, they are not only deepening their relationships with others, but also transforming their own inner lives. By choosing to love, they gain access to a deeper sense of purpose and meaning, something that cannot be found through achievement alone. In conclusion, Kierkegaard teaches us that true strength in love is found in vulnerability, self-awareness, and the courage to remain authentic even in the face of emotional challenges. Modern men, trapped by societal expectations, can reclaim their emotional freedom by embracing love as a path to personal growth and transformation. In doing so, they can move beyond emotional detachment and find the deepest fulfillment that love has to offer. True strength is not in emotional armor, but in the willingness to love with an open heart, without expectation, and with the courage to face whatever challenges love may bring. As we reach the conclusion of this journey, we return to Kierkegaard's profound insight. Love, in its most authentic form, is not a weakness but a demonstration of true strength. The modern man, conditioned to believe that love is something to avoid for the sake of emotional safety, often finds himself stuck in a life that feels emotionally disconnected and ultimately empty. Kierkegaard challenges this view by suggesting that avoidance of love is not self-protection, it is the very source of existential despair. The strength to love, to engage emotionally, and to embrace vulnerability is what leads to true self-realization and fulfillment. For men today, love is often seen as a risky endeavor, one that may expose them to pain, rejection, or emotional vulnerability. This fear of love arises from the belief that emotional openness is a sign of weakness, something to be avoided at all costs. But Kierkegaard teaches that this avoidance leads to a much deeper form of weakness, a disconnect from one's authentic self. He believed that living without love creates a life full of meaninglessness, a life that may appear successful in material terms but lacks the depth of true emotional connection. The paradox is clear. Avoiding love in an attempt to protect oneself from pain only leads to a greater emotional emptiness. In Kierkegaard's view, the leap of faith in love is essential to achieving a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling. This leap requires a radical surrender, the willingness to give up the need for control and to embrace love despite its inherent risks. Love is a journey, not one of certainty or ease, but one that allows us to grow beyond our fears, limitations, and the emotional armor we often build around ourselves. It is through this leap, this willingness to love, despite the potential for hurt, that we break free from the self-imposed isolation that many men experience. In choosing love, we choose to live fully, authentically, and courageously. For men who struggle with emotional vulnerability, this journey requires a profound shift in perspective. Instead of viewing love as a threat to their sense of control or strength, they must come to see it as the ultimate path to emotional freedom. The ability to love deeply and openly is not about giving up strength, but about cultivating a strength that comes from within, a strength that is rooted in self-awareness, emotional depth, and authenticity. This strength is not defined by the absence of emotion or vulnerability, but by the courage to express those emotions and to embrace the full experience of love, even when it is uncertain or uncomfortable. Kierkegaard's philosophy invites us to reflect on the true nature of love as self-overcoming. To love authentically is to engage in a continual process of becoming, to rise above the ego's need for validation, and to face life's challenges with an open heart. This is not about winning or conquering, but about growing together, learning from each other, and navigating the complexities of human connection with honesty and vulnerability. The man who loves authentically is not afraid of rejection or failure. He knows that love is not about perfection, but about the courage to keep loving, even when things are difficult. The emotional fulfillment that comes from embracing love is not something that can be achieved through the pursuit of material success or external validation. While success in these areas may bring temporary satisfaction, it is love that gives life meaning. Kierkegaard emphasizes that true fulfillment comes not from achieving personal goals or societal recognition, but from forming deep, emotional connections with others. This is the true source of strength, not emotional detachment, but emotional connection. The man who can embrace love, both its joys and its vulnerabilities, is the one who achieves true freedom and self-actualization. As we reflect on the implications of Kierkegaard's insights, it is clear that love is not an abstract concept, but a fundamental human need, one that men today must learn to embrace if they are to lead lives of true purpose and fulfillment. The leap of faith in love is not a call to reckless emotion,